Hi, today I will be ranking every sword for PvP based off things like combo potential, how easy the moves are to hit, and how kentrickable the moves are. Let's start off with Katana. There's nothing much to say about this sword, since the moves are slow, have no range, and no stun, meaning it's impossible to combo with. Straight F tier. The same can be said about Cutlass, since the moves are the exact same, except Cutlass just has a different design. Next up is Dual Katana. This sword is horrible but better than Katana and Cutlass. This is because the Z move actually has a stun to it, but the X move is close ranged, and actually locks you in place, which makes you vulnerable to attacks. I will put Dual Katana above the other two swords. Now we move on to our first uncommon sword, Iron Mace. This is also the first heavy sword, meaning at the end of the M1 combo, it smashes the ground, which has some AoE, and is good for grinding in first C. Also, this sword has a higher combo potential than Dual Katana, because of the X move, which stuns your opponent then sends them in the air, which is a good opening for a combo extender. This is still an F tier sword, but I will place this above the last three. The next sword is Triple Katana. The rework on this sword has made it more flashy. But as flashy as the moves like the Z are, they have an awful hitbox in combat. The X doesn't cover much distance, and it has little to no stun. However, I will still place this sword in the E tier, since it's miles better than the other swords I've ranked so far. Next up is Shark Saw. The Z move on this sword is very similar to Triple Katana's Z, but the X move is actually insane compared to the swords on the list so far. The X is a spin move that does okay damage and stuns your opponent. I will put this at the top of the E tier. The next sword is Twin Hooks. I honestly don't know what the devs were thinking to make this an uncommon sword. The Z move has a good hitbox, but it is very easily kentrickable. And the X move is a grab move with decent range, which breaks Ken and sends them up. A big con about the X is that it takes pretty long to do. So it's easy to prepare a kentrick or something. Nevertheless, this sword has high combo potential. This is the first B tier sword. Next up is the first rare sword, the Warden sword. This sword is basically an upgraded version of the Dual Katana. It has a close-ranged AoE attack as well as a projectile that has decent speed. I will put this above the Shark Saw. Next up is Trident. This sword has received a very good buff, especially to its damage. The water effects are not a bluff, since the X move has almost as much damage as a legendary or mythical sword. The go-to combo for this sword is Z into X. I will put this above Warden sword. The next sword is Pipe. I was really hyped about this sword and I can say it didn't disappoint. It's one of the most fun swords to use for me, and the moves are pretty overpowered. For example, the X move is a fast projectile with decent AoE which deals good damage and leaves a pit of fire on the ground. The Z move is good to start combos and extend combos with, so it's overall pretty decent, and it will be our first D tier sword. Next up is Jitte. Jitte has always been a reliable sword because of its X move. This is a teleport move with almost the same distance as poor X, although it isn't good to actually use in combos or for a sword main build, but because of how reliable the X is, I will put this above Pipe. Next up is Longsword. The devs did this sword wrong, because it used to be pretty fun doing Rumble F into the Z and spamming the X ability on it. Now the moves are strictly for ground fights. The go-to combo for this sword is Z into X. This still goes above Jitte and Pipe because of the damage and how easy it is to combo with. Next up is Dual-Headed Blade. This sword has a good X move, much like Triple Dark Blade X. It sends out 3 projectiles, but the Z move is literally slower than walking pace. I'm gonna put this sword below Trident. Next up is probably our first S tier sword, Gravity Cane. You can't call what this sword went through a rework. This sword has the easiest to hit Z move I've ever seen in my life. It grabs you from such a distance, and it makes you want to make a perfect circle straight through your monitor. I will place this in the S tier. Next up is a sword that I personally think should be straight up deleted from this game, Dragon Trident.
What's this? Huh? What's this? What the
Good words.
is this?
Good words.
Huh? What?
As if the X and Z moves of this sword weren't already good. Now the X is the size equal to that of the entire continent of Africa. This is probably the most used sword in wars and for sword main builds in general. This will be placed above Gravity Cane because even an infant will manage to land a Trident X on someone in PvP. Next sword is Soul Cane. This sword is probably most known for being used in skilled builds, but it is also widely used as a stun in the middle of a combo. It has decent range, very low cooldown, breaks Ken and has a good stun duration. The go-to combo with this sword is Z into X. This goes above twin hooks. Next up is our first legendary sword, Pole V1. What are the devs smoking to make this a legendary sword? I grow 1 year older every time I finish casting the Z ability on this sword. The X is not terrible if you have a stun right before you use it. I will place this right under Trident. Next up is the best sword for sniping, Buddy Sword. Quick note. This sword has pretty decent combo potential with the Z. This move also burns, which is extremely annoying for your opponent. The X move is a long range snipe move, similar to the unawakened C move of Spider. This sword is mostly used with G-Human, but the best combo for it is with Sharkman. I will place this sword in B tier. Next up is Dark Dagger. This sword has insane combo potential. Dark Dagger's abilities are close up, so getting a combo off is much easier. For example, Dark Dagger Z into G-Human C, and Sanguine Art Z after Dark Dagger X. The combo potential of this sword places it above Buddy Sword in the B tier. Next up is probably one of the most lore accurate swords in terms of damage, Bisento. The Z is pretty easy to hit because it has 3 slashes going out. The X move also pulls nearby enemies in, meaning in a combo it is a reliable stun as well as a damage dealer. The go-to combo for this sword is X then Z. The Z does not Ken break, but the X does Ken break. This will be the first A tier sword. Next up is Canvandar. This sword is incredible at literally absorbing Ken dodges. Both the moves are fast and can close distance between you and your opponent. The go-to combo is X then Z after a stun. The X is multiple projectiles, so if you turn your camera fast enough you can send them in different directions. I will place this sword below Dark Dagger because it has less combo potential. Next up is the king of deleting HP, Saber. This sword deals an insane amount of damage if you get the critical hit with the Z ability. However, you have to be very close for the crit. The X move is a big but slow projectile, often used right before doing the Z move in combos. Another downside to this sword is that it is very easily Kentrickable. I will be putting this at the top of C tier because it has too many cons apart from being able to do a lot of damage. Next up is probably the flashiest rework sword, Midnight Blade. This sword is pretty fun to use because of how satisfying it is to land the Z move. This sword has good combo potential because the moves don't have too much knockback, but the Z ability is very Kentrickable and easy to counter. I will place this at a low B tier. Next sword is the only sword that gets buffed when using it with a specific fruit, Koko. This sword is fun to use because of the X move, being a very fast snipe move that breaks Ken. If you pair this sword up with the control fruit, you can increase the range and hitbox of the X move while you're in the room of control. However, the Z of this sword has bad range and combo potential. This will unfortunately place it only at the top of C tier. The next sword I will rank is the sword that Fur made famous, Pole V2. This used to be incredible when it first came out, but it continuously got nerfed again and again and again. After the rework, the usage rate for this sword dropped off because of the hitbox and stun time nerfs. Even Fur himself stopped using this sword. However, this sword is still commendable for its ability to carry a lot of combos, so I will place it in between Canvandar and Buddy Sword. Next up is Rengoku. This sword does a lot of damage, especially with the burn of the Z ability. The combo potential is good because of the XZ combo after any stun. One thing that makes it annoying is the screen shake of the Z move, but I will still place this sword right below Canvandar in B tier for its damage output. Next up is Saddi. This sword is probably the biggest glow up a sword has had. It went from this to this. The moves are fast, meaning you can do X into Z after a stun very quickly. It also has good combo potential with the Z, which spins them and knocks them up, and the knockback doesn't go far, so a lot of moves such as Sanguine C and G-Human C would work well after it. I will put this below Bisento. Next up is Shark Anchor. This sword has one of the most annoying moves, being the Z, because it's incredibly spammy. The combo potential with this sword is pretty good too. For example, the Z into a grab skill like Sanguine Z works perfectly. Also the X move is very reliable as a combo extender. This sword is mostly used with Portal and of course Do. Could you guess why? For 999. This sword is going at the bottom of S tier. Next up is Shisui. This is another sword that is used in skilled builds. The moves are extremely fast and need pinpoint accuracy. But this sword is so kentrickable and both moves only take 1 ken each. Plus the Z ability doesn't have much stun to it. I will place this at the top of C tier. Next up is the most used combo extender, Spikey Trident. This sword is one of the best swords for the very long ranged X skill which sticks onto a player and sends them right back to you, so you can punish them some more. This is unless you do the very simple tactic of clicking E before they do it, which will cause them to start fighting their demons for messing up their combo. Please learn to kentrick Spikey Trident X. Anyway, I will put this below Gravity Cane. Next up is Tushita. The usage rate of this sword has dropped off so much because everyone wants to use the absolute best sword and nothing less. This sword is very reliable for breaking ken because both moves break ken. If you have anything better than the hand-to-eye coordination of a 5-year-old, the go-to combo for this sword is Z into X. This sword doesn't have good combo potential because it has too much knockback. I will put this in A tier because it lacks combo potential. Next up is Wando. This sword's rework didn't make it a lot better except for the X, which you can finally land on someone, because before the rework, the X ability traveled slower than a depressed turtle. The go-to combo for this sword is Z into X obviously, and if you stick the Z, it can't be kentricked. I will place this sword above Twin Hooks. Next sword is Yama. This used to be used a lot, but just like the Tushita, the usage rate disappeared like never mind. Swords like Gravity Cane, Dragon Trident and Spikey Trident just took over, but Yama is still a decent stun to use with the X like with Shadow, and the Z is very reliable for closing distance in combos like with Sand. I will put this at the bottom of A tier. Next up is my favorite sword, Fox Lamp. This sword has an agonizingly long stun, being its Z ability. I've memed about it multiple times by saying you can take a selfie while your opponent is being ragdolled around for like 5 seconds. I will place this below Gravity Cane still, because it's harder to hit the moves of Fox Lamp. Next up is a sword that deserves its own tier for how amazingly pathetic it is, Hallow Scythe. The Z is the only good move of this, and it's still hard to combo with it. And the X has such a bad knockback and end lag to it that it is impossible to follow up with any moves after it. I have no idea why this is a mythical sword, but I'm placing it in F tier. The next sword is mostly known for being mainly used for skilled builds, Dark Blade. This sword in my opinion is in the middle. It has a decent combo potential because the Z is a stun and the X isn't. The hitbox isn't as good as a lot of swords, but is still usable for PvP. The go-to combo for this is Z into X. The moves half the time can't break ken, unless it's a direct hit. I will place this at a low to mid B tier. Next up is Cursed Dual Katana. This used to be the best sword all around before the sword reworks, but it is still an S tier sword. This is because of how good it is for supporting combos. For example, Do C, then CDKZ, then Kabature X. The Z and X moves of this sword can both be used one after another, and the ability to hold the Z helps you regain abilities that you need which are in cooldown, and also it's very useful for extending combos with. This sword is also good at covering distances. I will put this below Fox Lamp, because you can kentrick it quite easily. Next up is True Triple Katana. This sword is a pinnacle of brain rot.
牙舞爪健身操，祝您健康，步步高，撸的。
The X move for some reason can snatch you from 30 miles away, and good luck kentricking it, because that will be the only time you use ken in that entire PvP session. This sword has very good combo potential, because the X gives you a reasonable amount of time to go up and hit a combo. The go-to combo for this sword can go both ways, because if you do Z into X and your X casts while they're in front of you, they can't escape, because they will be dragged right back. I will put this sword above Gravity Cane. And the last sword for this list is True Triple Yoru. This sword doesn't need an explanation for going at the top of S tier. The hitbox of this sword's X is enough to rank it as the best sword. I wish I had it. Here is the finished tier list. That's it for this video of ranking swords. If you disagree with any of the placements then let me know why in the comments. I reply to every single comment.